We have been focusing on the 2020 race, but Canadians are going to the polls on Monday. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau is seeking a second term in office, but he faces stiff competition from Andrew Scheer of the Conservative Party and Jagmeet Singh of the New Democratic Party. Last month, a Blackface scandal rocked Trudeau's campaign, but the contest was close even before then. Joining me from Toronto is David Akin. He is the chief political correspondent for Global News. Thanks so much for being with us. Canadians don't directly elect the Prime Minister. Can you remind us of how elections in Canada work?
That's right. It's a little different in the United States. In the U.S., of course, when you go into a ballot box, you can vote for your local representative, your Congress representative, and then you can vote for the president. Who do you want to be president? Not that way in Canada. In Canada, Canadians will be going to the polls on Monday, and their ballot will just have the candidates to represent their local electoral district, the member of parliament, or MP. And then, at the end of the day, we count up, well, how many MPs came from each party, and the leader of the party with more MPs generally gets to be prime minister. So in 2015, Justin Trudeau's party, the Liberal Party, had the most MPs, and he became prime minister. On Monday, Andrew Scheer's Conservative Party could have the most MPs, and then we'd be talking about Prime Minister Scheer. So that's the way it works here. And there's one other wrinkle. We have some other parties. You mentioned one, the New Democratic Party of Canada, sort of a left-of-center party. Its leader, Jagmeet Singh, probably won't be Prime Minister, but could influence Singh if it's a minority government. The Green Party could win a couple of seats. And in the province of Quebec, it's the French-speaking province of Quebec, there's a party there, a nationalist party, that wants to make Quebec a separate country. They're called the Bloc Québécois, and they may win a bunch of seats in Parliament as well. It's going to be if you're interested in politics, come to Canada on Monday. It's going to be really, really interesting.
So what issues, David, are Prime Minister hopefuls running on?
There was a poll out just this week from the Angus Reid Institute, and I'll talk about the so-called progressive parties first. That's Liberal, Green, NDP, and Bloc. It sort of divides on the progressive parties. Three top issues for people who are ready to vote for those parties. Number one, climate change. Number two, healthcare in Canada. Number three, affordable housing. And here comes a sharp divide, because the top issues for conservative-minded voters, none of those. Number one for conservative-minded voters is, I pay too much in taxes. That's number one. The number two for conservative voters is the size of the federal deficit. And number three for conservative voters is honesty and transparency in government. So there's quite a sharp divide between conservative-minded voters and progressive-minded voters, and that's very much being reflected in the kinds of campaigns that all the parties are running.
Really interesting. Well, President Obama endorsed Trudeau on Wednesday. How significant is this for Trudeau's re-election bid?
Well, sources in the Conservative campaign were joking with me that Andrew Scheer, the Conservative leader, should have remarked on that, saying, you know, Obama endorsed Hillary, and how much did that help? Not much, of course. So certainly Obama and Justin Trudeau have a good personal relationship. Justin Trudeau came in just as Obama was finishing up. They're both progressive leaders, and it's no surprise. The Liberals here are saying they didn't ask for this favor. They didn't reach out to President Obama for it. And it put it's a bit of a morale booster for the Liberals, certainly. There has been issues, just as in the United States. Here, there's been a lot of talk ahead of this campaign about so-called foreign interference in elections. Right. But I think most people were thinking about the Russians or Chinese. So the Conservatives here, of course, saying, wait a minute, isn't that a bit of foreign interference in our election? In any event, some good news for the Liberals. Don't think it'll have much effect.
So how has the Prime Minister been campaigning since the Blackface scandal in September?
I was on the plane. I was on his campaign plane when this news broke, and needless to say, it's hard to imagine this with a leader. Obviously, in the United States, there's been a couple of instances. Remember the governor of Virginia being caught with some potentially old blackface photos, and it has a different sort of context in Canada. But Justin Trudeau's approach to this was quickly to own it, say, yes, this was me. I was younger. He was 29 years old when these appeared. He's 47 now. Apologized to his caucus members, many of which are turban Sikhs, are from South Asia. He has some black members of his caucus. So he's He's been as contrite as he can be, and by and large, it has not seemed to have had that much effect on his party standing, though he personally is not so popular. What we've been able to gauge, both through anecdotes and a bit of polling, is that visible minorities of an earlier generation, in other words, older people, they've by and large accepted Trudeau's apology, and they feel he has shown enough contrition. But younger voters of color, they've been more offended, and many of them have said they have now changed their opinion of Trudeau, and as a result may change their voting intention. We've really never been here before. It's hard to gauge and compare against anything. It looks like it may be a minor factor, though, at the end of the day.
So Trudeau said on the campaign trail that he needed a strong government to continue to stand up to President Trump. How has President Trump, and particularly trade, played a role in this election?
Yeah, this language from Trudeau, and it's just very recent when he's brought up Trump's name, is very interesting. All through the negotiations of what we call the new NAFTA, the USMCA, that trade deal between Mexico, Canada, and the United States, all through that period of Trudeau's first 4 years in office, whenever we've asked him, hey, what do you think about Trump's treatment of women? What do you think about Trump on this? What do you think about whatever? Trudeau's been very careful to say, listen, that's an American matter. I'm not going to comment on it. But now in the dying days of a campaign here, he's talking about having to stand up to Trump, and Trump has become a bit of a campaign issue. I'm not so sure that that's going to be very effective for the Liberal. For that New Democrat left-leaning party, if you think of the most left part of the Democratic Party, AOC in New York City, for example, that's your New Democrats. They don't like this trade deal. They don't like the new NAFTA. They want it dead, and they're happy to see it ripped up and shredded. Liberals and conservatives, by and large, believe in NAFTA, believe in a strong Canada-U.S. partnership. It's the biggest economic partnership in the world. You know, $1.5 billion a day goes back and forth across our border, and most Canadians think we need to preserve that trade. I think a lot of Americans think we need to preserve that trade, and of course that is the big issue. But of course we need the White House on board to negotiate, and right now, of course, Congress has the new NAFTA in front of it. We'll see where that goes, but that's where that issue plays here. That's all about this very important trading relationship that the U.S. has with Canada and Canada has with the U.S.
All right, David Akin, we will be watching closely next week. David, thank you very much.